And hopefully you can see how much cleaner is our app.js, where now we're splitting up the functionality in separate files for our routes. Beautiful. I think we really clean up our app.js, but we're not out of the woods yet. If we take a look at our auth.js, yeah, this one looks somewhat clean, but we need to keep in mind that we only have one request. We only have one post request to our login. However, if we take a look at our people.js, it is still somewhat of a mess because we have a bunch of functionality since, of course, we have more routes. And of course, a better setup is if we would be able to split this up into a separate file. And I'm talking about the functions. So imagine this scenario where we only would have a router. Then I'm going to set up my method, whether that's get, post, or whatever. Then I'm still going to have the route, but the functionality, this one, the controller, is going to be in a separate file. So it's going to be a separate function. And you'll see how much cleaner our file is going to look like just in a second. So again, we need to head back to our Express tutorial. Now I'll zoom in. I'll create a new folder. And again, common convention is calling this controllers for the reason that there is a pattern called MVC. So model view controller. And then again, we come up with the name. In my case, I'm going to go with jobs, or I'm sorry, not jobs. I'm going to go with people. And I'm not going to set up one for the other one for the auth, since there's only one. But for people, I will set up a controllers file by the name of people.js. And here, I just want to set up first my functions. And the way it's going to work, we're going to go with const. And then again, you just need to come up with a name. So for example, for get request, where I'm getting people, I'm just going to call this get people. Keep in mind, it is just a function. So the name is really up to you. And since I'm going to have the same functionality, of course, I need to keep in mind that I do need to have access to rec and res. Now, what's really cool that once I pass this function as a reference, it's still going to work. So I simply go here with this rec res and set up the functionality. Now, probably faster is just going to be doing like this, where I cut out and then back in the controllers, I copy and paste. Now, I know that some people might find this annoying, but yes, I'm purposely refactoring the code so you can see the benefits right away. And I'm going to do that for all the functions. And for a little bit, it's going to probably look messy, where I'm going to do the same thing for the post. So I guess first, I'm just going to cut it out. And then back in the controllers, not in the routes, in the controllers, let's come up with that function as well. So const, and in this case, I'm going to call this create person. I'll copy and paste the code. Okay, awesome. Back in the routes, let's get the postman one. So in the controller, let's also call this const and create person and postman, like so. Copy and paste. That's my function. Then back in the routes, I have one for put. So I think it would make sense if I call this, for example, update person. Again, cut out everything starting with a function and then all the way to the closing parenthesis. Cut it out. Back in controllers, we're going to call it const update person, like so. Copy and paste. And lastly, let's deal with a delete one as well. So let's keep scrolling. Again, we cut everything out like so. And then back in the controller, let's create one for deleting the person. So const delete person and copy and paste. And if you remember, which seems like an eternity ago, when we covered the exports, I said that, of course, we can also use right away module exports and then whatever. So for example, in this case, that could be get people or create person or create person postman. Now, in my case, I always prefer to do my exports all the way in the bottom where I say module exports. Now this is going to be the object. And now I just want to access all the functions. Keep in mind, it doesn't change the functionality. Functionality is the same where I'm basically exporting an object with a bunch of functions. So here I just need to reference their names. So it's get people, it is create person postman, then update person, and lastly, it is also for deleting the person. Now, one thing that is missing, of course, is the people. Like I said, this is just going to be temporary. So I'm going to go to the controller here and I'll copy and paste. Now, in this case, the path is correct because the routes was already in a separate folder. So that should still work. And of course, now I can save my controllers. And in the routes, what I need to do is, of course, import all of them. So in this case, we go with const. And again, I'll write away the structure, all of them. So let me just copy and paste. I think it's going to be faster, like so. Since the names, of course, are going to be exactly the same, I destructured them, and I destructured them from require. And then, of course, we're looking for controllers. And then more specifically, I'm looking for the people, like so. And once we have required them, of course, now we pass in the function reference. So for example, here I can say get people. Now I do need to add a comma. And if everything is correct, our functionality is still going to work. So in the controllers, we're still accessing rec and res, and we're still sending back the response. But of course, the benefit of all of this work is the fact that our routes file is going to get much cleaner. So in here, remember the name was create person, like so. And then we have one for create person postman. And let's set it up like so. Then we have also one for update person. And lastly, we have one for deleting person, right? So we go here with delete person. I save, again, I'm not going to test all of them out, but I'm going to go with, for example, delete. And I'm going to look for 4. This still works. I remove the person number 4. And also, if I check out the get one for the people, this also should get me back the array. So I know that my functionality still works, but I nicely cleaned out my file. Now, lastly, before we talk about the databases, I just want to mention that when it comes to setting up the routes, we actually have 2 flavors. So I'm going to comment these ones out and I'll show you another way how we can set up the routes. And effectively, the benefit is that we can set it up in fewer lines of code. Keep in mind, the functionality is going to be exactly the same. So again, this is going to be the case where it comes down to your preference. If you prefer setting up your routes this way, you can definitely do so. There's no rule against it. If you prefer the method that I'm about to show you, then of course you can use that one instead. So we go with a router and then we go with a route. And then in the route, I set up the path. And again, since there's get and post that match exactly what I have in base, same situation. I just set up the /. And instead of setting up them separately, for example, get and post, I can just chain them. So chain one after another. So I go with get. That is, of course, my method. That is not changing. And then I need to pass in my controller function. Okay. As you can see, almost the same. In this case, however, I can change it. Now, the method names did not change. The path did not change. They're still actually referencing the base path in here, what we have in app.js. But since we can chain it, we can simply write it in one line of code. So, of course, the callback function is going to be create, and I believe it was person. So create and person, like so. Then we have, of course, one for the postman. So in this case, of course, it's not going to change. It's pretty much going to be the same logic where we go with the router, route, like so. And then we go with / postman. And then, of course, I want to chain dot, and I believe it was post, right? And then we go with create person postman. And then we can again set up one line of code for the put and delete. So in this case, I think I'm going to just copy where I have router dot route. Then we set up our route. And in this case, it is going to be / and then ID. And then we have 2. We have one for put and we have one for delete. So we go with delete. And then as far as the callback functions, we go with update person. And also we have delete person. And finally, let me just stress it one more time, where whichever setup you choose is really up to your preference. The functionality is exactly the same. We go with a route, and then we can just chain our methods and add the callback functions. Now, in this case, we set up each route separately. So, for example, if you have multiple URLs that match, yeah, you're in good shape. You can just set up route, pass in the URL, and then chain all the methods. And lastly, let me just quickly test it one more time since I made some changes. I send it, and there it is. I successfully get back my people. So with this in place, with our router in place, with the fact that we have covered all the methods, the get, post, put, and delete, I think we're ready for the next level where we connect our server